I'm really excited to have our guest on episode 10, Gene Musser. Gene is a retired cardiologist, and he's also a member of the Fitchburg Redistricting Committee that just wrapped up their work a few months ago that has added actually a new section to our district. So at one point, Gene was not in District 1, but now he is. So he will be our first D1 All-Stars that's a little bit east of Seminole Highway. So we can talk much more about that later, but let me give the floor to Gene. Gene, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Joe. I would dispute a couple of items. One is I don't view myself as a gem, and I certainly don't think I'm an all-star, but I'm so pleased to talk with you about whatever you'd like to discuss.
Awesome. Well, we can agree to disagree, sir, but we're glad to have you in our district and glad to have you in our community. So the question I always start out asking everybody about is tell us a little bit about yourself, give us your story, anything you feel comfortable telling us.
Well, I grew up in California, went to college at Berkeley Medical School at WashU in St. Louis, and I've lived in Madison area since 1979. My career as a cardiologist, as you said, was at what was called Madison General Hospital, and now Meritor. In the last many years, I was employed by the UW Medical School, practicing at Meritor. I retired at the age of 72 in 2019, I guess it must have been. I decided that I'd been in healthcare 50 years, and that was enough years, time to let somebody else do it. Gloria and I were living in Middleton. We decided to downsize. As a part of the process of doing that, we found a duplex in Fitchburg where we moved in 2015. So we're living just off of Seminole on Dolly Drive as part of Harlan Hills.
Excellent. So a lot of kids' dreams are always to be a doctor when they grow up. Is that what you wanted, or how'd you end up getting into the profession?
Well, in the 8th grade, I planned to either be a police officer, an FBI agent, or a nuclear physicist. I don't think I knew what that last was. But in a visit to the Museum of Science and Industry with my grandparents, farmers in Indiana, they bought me a visible man model, which I made and then gave a report in science class about all the body's organ systems. I found that to be very interesting, and that kind of set me off in that direction.
So what led you specifically to the field of cardiology?
Well, I started off as an infectious disease guy, oddly enough. I might have done that, but I liked the action in intensive care units, oddly enough. I liked the stress of the middle of the night. Will he die? Will he not? Taking care of heart attacks, strokes, and all the other serious illnesses. I just found that to be challengingly interesting and in an odd sort of way fun, if you can look at it that way. So that's really what took me to cardiology.
So infectious diseases, that's quite appropriate during these times.
Yeah, it was interesting stuff. I really loved it. It was really mainly, I think that at the time, that was principally an academic pursuit. And although I was interested in teaching, I wasn't interested in a mainline academic career. Cardiology allowed me to teach and practice in a university type setting without doing basic research, in which I had little interest.
So you said the cardiology, sort of profession is, has a high level of stress. Did you sort of experience those things throughout your career? What kind of ups and downs and stressful moments did you experience?
Well, it's kind of always stressful, in the sense that life and death is kind of built into that business. I didn't find that to be negatively stressful. I found it to be interesting and engaging and fully occupied my attention, but in a positive sort of way. I mean, I can't say it wasn't negatively stressful from time to time, when there's just too much stuff going on to deal with at one time. But I sought that. I sought that. As a younger guy, I liked rock climbing, and it's for the same reason. I liked the intensity and the focus of it. And I can say that it was really rarely boring rock climbing and rarely boring in cardiology.
So do you still rock climb?
I gave it up. Thank you very much. And I'm still here. So
Okay, great. So you said you retired 2 years ago. What do you do to sort of occupy that need for a rush, I guess?
Well, there's nothing as engaging as a medical practice. So I think I couldn't replace that with the kind of anything else that I'm able to do at the age of 75. At my retirement party, I said that I planned a decade or more, depending on my competence, in what I call civic engagement. I've always had some level of civic engagement for really since my college years, but really constrained by the problem of often having 12 or more hour days, night call and all that kind of stuff. So being off of work, I thought that I would be able to do more of that sort of thing. So that's what I've, to use your term, replaced it with.
So you said you moved from Middleton to Fitchburg. Why Fitchburg in particular?
Well, it was just a quirk, really. You know, when you're moving from your house to some other place, you have a couple of different options. You can get a accepted offer and then find a place to move to, or you can sell your house, move to an apartment, and then find a place to move to, or you can find a place to move to, buy it, now you own two places. So when we had an accepted offer, then we looked around to find what was suitable for us, and this ended up being suitable. This seemed to me at the time to be the wilds of Fitchburg. You know, I hadn't been out this way much. I really didn't know much about Fitchburg, but we said, fine, that's where we're moving. Seemed to be a good place. And it was purely an accident of what was available at the time.
So what do you think about where you live? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, we're delighted, really. You know, we have excellent neighbors. Gloria and I both like to do a lot of road biking, and we're very near to the roundabout. So all the main trails of Madison come together about a mile from us. Mm-hmm. The bike ride out to Paoli is a long-time standard place to go. And I like the town. I certainly like the people that I've met here. And it's been a place where I could actually work doing some of the political stuff. And it's all worked out just perfectly. Yes. And while I was still working, the commute was easier.
Yeah. The thing I love about, and we probably live less than a mile from each other, is that bike roundabout. That's probably one of my favorite parts of living where I live is you can just get anywhere on a bicycle. We're going to take a break, but when I get back, I'd really like to talk more about civic engagement, because it's something I'm obviously interested in as well because of what I chose to do. But we're going to wrap up. We're here with Gene Musser talking about civic engagement, talking about profession, talking about where you live. D1 All-Stars. We'll be back right after this break. We're here with Gene Musser. Gene, I'm really interested in diving a little bit deeper into something you mentioned, Fitchburg Progress. Tell us about it. How'd you get involved with it?
Well, it was really by accident. As a lot of things, let's call it serendipity. I was at a bar before a Dane County Democratic Party meeting, ran into a state Democratic Party organizer. When she learned that I lived in Fitchburg, she said, "Oh, we need a neighborhood group in Fitchburg. Would you be willing to start it?" I, knowing nothing about neighborhood groups, said fine. So that's how it really came about. The brief background of this is that beginning in the Obama years, the state party had organized what are called neighborhood action teams to work within their neighborhoods on voter registration and voter turnout. And so Dane County has a multitude of those groups, really covers the county. Many 10 or 15 groups in the city of Madison and groups in all the surrounding suburbs as well. Fitchburg had such a group called United Fitchburg, started in maybe 2008 approximately. And the group had blown up over personality disputes. And so really it just stopped functioning. So Fitchburg at the time had no such group, and Mackenzie, the organizer, said, would I be willing to reconstitute a group to do this work in Fitchburg, to do voter registration and voter turnout? So I said, fine. And I met a person who had been involved in Fitchburg Progress. Arlene Silveira is her name. I'm sure you know her well. Mm-hmm. Arlene had been a wonderful woman, by the way. Arlene had been president of the Madison School Board, very active politically in Fitchburg, and had been involved in the prior group. She and I met at a neighborhood team meeting, and we agreed we would be co-chairs of this group, and we would work to set it up. So she really was connected here. I was newly in town, but she arranged for several people to come to be part of the organizing group. It included Nancy Arnold, Steve Arnold, former mayor, Julia Radafrada, an alder, as you know, Dorothy Krause, alder at the time, and Dane County supervisor, Ann DeGarmo, who is a supervisor, her then fiance, Sam Voorhees, Gabriella March Gerhardt, who at the time was thinking about running for office, Wendy Hathaway, Tony Hartman, former alder, Elizabeth Cox, pediatrician. So anyway, we met the summer of 2019, agreed to organize a group, decided to be active in state and national campaigns, both political and campaigns and issue campaigns, but to stay out, specifically to stay out of local campaigns and issues, at least as a group. So we set up meetings. We began to have monthly meetings at the library. You attended one of them. We had speakers, starting with Jay Heck from Common Cause. We had Senator Miller. We had Jill Karofsky, candidate at the time for Supreme Court, Melissa Agard, and others, Joe Parisi, and others. And through the 2020, then we organized around the presidential election. We had, with the help of a state party organizer, we had over 100 people make phone calls. We had distributed 150 yard signs. We sent hundreds of postcards to voters. Because of the pandemic, we weren't doing in-person registration or canvassing in homes. And the effect of that, I don't know. Fitchburg put out 3,000 more votes for Joe Biden than it did for Hillary Clinton. Our contribution to that, it's no way to know. We hope there was some. But that's what the group has been. We have been hibernating because of the pandemic, but plan to become reactivated in the spring.
Excellent. So, one thing interesting that I just want to point out to folks that are viewing is that you made the distinction between sort of being involved in local politics versus, stepping a little bit bigger and looking at state, federal government. For those who don't know, local seats like alders and county supervisors are nonpartisan. So we don't, have to, although people may join the Democratic or Republican Party or the Green Party or something else, we don't, run as that when we run for office. And one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was your involvement in the League of Women Voters, which sort of is explicitly nonpartisan, and the work that they do is not necessarily affiliated with a political party. Can you talk a little bit about League of Women Voters and what you do through them?
At our meetings, Fitchburg Progress meetings, we had invited Joanne Bouchon from the League of Women Voters, who had initiated something called the Apartment Project. And this project was directed at helping apartment residents register to vote and know where they're supposed to vote. And the basic concept being that because apartment residents relocate more frequently than homeowners, there might be a greater need for those services. How do you register and where do you vote? So they, what Joanne and her group identified really was hundreds of apartment complexes throughout Dane County, I think 40 or 50 in Fitchburg particularly, which I was interested in. And so then what I did was I looked at the list and became what's called an apartment adopter. So I identified apartment units that I would work with the management to help distribute relevant information. And so I adopted a bunch of the Avante apartments. Those are all on the east side. Those are upper income, larger, more modern complexes. I also adopted some in D1, including the Belmar apartment homes, which are on Red Arrow Trail, just down from Luna. Nature's Retreat, which is along Crescent, and a couple of other complexes along Crescent. So I contacted the managers and asked them if they would, and I had the literature to be distributed. Avante said, fine. We gave them 350 brochures. They said they would put one at each door. The manager at Belmar did the same thing. Jose is his name. And the owner of Nature's Retreat did the same thing. So we distributed information about registration and voting location. There's really no metric on how successful that was. I mean, that's one of the weaknesses of the program. It's theoretically important to do that, and it's theoretical that if you distribute these informations, some effect will be had. Don't really know we do those things.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not you can track the metrics, clearly you're making some sort of an impact by making contact, even if two people hop out to vote. That's a good thing. So I'm as somebody who's, obviously knocked doors to get elected, I just want to stress to our viewers that that's really incredibly important because apartments are harder to get into. And often if you're a candidate, running for office, you're going to get lists of voters that frequently vote in elections and oftentimes not necessarily get information from folks who are either infrequent or have to move around a lot. So really appreciate that work. And I've had the pleasure of working with Joanne to help get the vote out during the presidential election in the middle of COVID. And just the League of Women Voters, volunteers and staff are just incredibly dedicated. So we're here with Jean, wrapping up a conversation on civic engagement. We're going to continue on our next segment to talk a little bit about local government and redistricting when we get back. D1 All-Stars, we will see you after the break. D1 All-Stars, we are back. So really interesting conversation. We've talked about, sort of, I want to say partisan, but sort of party-driven, issue-driven work around civic engagement. We've also talked about nonpartisan work to get the vote out and to get people engaged. Now I want to talk a little bit about local politics. So, Jean, you were appointed to a committee which sought to redraw our maps based on population growth and change and movement. Every city does this, every county does this, every state government and the federal government obviously does this every 10 years after the census. Can you talk to us a little bit about what a redistricting committee is, what its charge is, and your role on that committee?
Well, the committee was appointed by Mayor Richardson. The chair was Randy Udell, who was current council president, and there were representatives from each of the four aldermanic districts, one each, and there were two at-large representatives, of which I was one. And the charge to the committee is to look at what's become of Fitchburg over the 10 years since the last census, look at how the population growth has occurred, where it's occurred, what the growth is, and then, if necessary, to rebalance the districts. The goal is that each aldermanic district would have approximately an equal population, and approximately equal is defined as greater than or equal to 10% of the average of all of them, and to make sure that and there's statute about what those aldermanic districts need to consist of. They need to be compact, contiguous, and should make sense in terms of who lives in those districts. And as part of the process, it's important to make sure that minorities are appropriately represented in the voting population. So that's what the charge of the committee was. We worked with city staff, including Wade, who's the head of city planning, as well as the mayor. He really provided the data upon which we worked. And then we looked at what's become the population over the last 10 years and what needed to be done to rebalance the districts. Fitchburg had grown by about 4,000 or 5,000 people in the interval over the 10 years. The growth was not uniformly distributed. So about half of it occurred in what's District 3, which is in the east end of Fitchburg. And if you've ever driven out Lacey, you've seen all the apartment complexes, condo complexes out there. And the other half of the growth occurred in District 4, principally along the eastern part of it. District 4 is the U-shaped district along the bottom, but east and west as well. So those two districts had approximately 2,000 voter increase in each of those. District 1 and 2 had negligible change. And so what had to happen to balance off the district sizes was to move people out of District 3 and 4 somewhere else, so that the districts were of approximately equal size while remaining contiguous. They're not supposed to be shaped strangely. You've seen maps of gerrymandered districts. So those are the things that we were to do. And an important aspect of that is to not eliminate minority-majority so-called districts. So you had to be attentive to what the racial makeup of the districts was. Fitchburg is about 9% African-American, 17% Hispanic, and then mixed other entities, So District 1, for instance, had always been minority-majority. That means that the minority voters represent a majority of the people in District 1, likewise in 3.
So that's a lot of really interesting information. And as you said, Gene, my district obviously grew a lot, and some of the other districts in landmass shrank a little bit. So you actually were in District 2 at one point, and now you're in District 1. So tell us a little bit about that change. And I promise, as my guest, there's no conflict of interest here. I like Gene and Gene likes me, but he didn't try to get into my district. But tell us a little bit about that change.
So in District 1 had not grown much in population. The main growth, as I said, was in 3 and 4. So the way these things got bad, and because they needed to be contiguous and compact, what Wade Thompson, I think, who had looked at how this could be done, found that in order to balance it off, if you moved part of District 2 into 1, so basically the area that is east of Fish Hatchery but west of Edenbury approximately, and down to McKee, moved into District 1, and if the parts of the apartments and other residences around Fish Hatchery moved from District 3 to 2, then that would depopulate 3 enough that it came down to approximately appropriate level, and then moved a few neighborhoods from 3 into 4 so that was approximately the right number. And we ended up with Districts 1, 2, and 4 that are about the same number, and District 3 is a little underpopulated, but it's within the 10% allowable distribution, and will probably come up to the same once Town of Madison's been incorporated and some other apartment complexes are complete.
So we have another probably 1,500 people that are going to be Fitchburg residents.
Right. And I can say that the committee worked very diligently. They were really very good membership. Greg Jones was a D2 representative. And so I think, and in the end, District 1, which had been minority-majority, remained that way, though a little bit less so. I think we accomplished what needed to be done.
Excellent. Well, we're starting to wrap up, and I wanted to ask, just as a whole, what is the takeaway and the importance of this type of a process for, people living their everyday lives here in Fitchburg?
It's important to make sure that one person gets one vote, and that the citizens are properly represented in their city council. And I think that's the way it is. I think you're a Puerto Rican extraction. There's an African American gentleman before. Julia is Hispanic. So I think the races are properly represented and the neighborhoods are properly represented.
Well, Gene, thank you for sharing this process with us and talking to us about sort of civic engagement. Hoping that, everybody watching this will, find a way to get involved and, reach out to your alders, reach out to folks in your community to really be a part of, shaping our everyday lives and our lived realities, especially on the local level. Thank you, Gene, for spending time with us. This is Joe, D1 All-Stars, and we're a wrap.